Hello, and welcome to the first episode of American Motherhood. My name is Bethany, and I have a very clear vision for this podcast. As a mom to two young girls in Central Ohio, I want to explore how society, and of course that includes politics, shapes the modern American motherhood experience. I believe the most effective way we can do that is to offer productive and genuine conversation between liberal and conservative moms in our community. I continue the search for conservative voices to join the podcast. Please consider this opportunity and email americanmotherhood@gmail.com if you or someone you know might be interested in joining me. Today, I am sharing a conversation with Nicole Marshall, our treasurer and CFO of the Westerville City School District, to bring awareness to this critical moment for Ohio public schools. The state is currently preparing their 2-year budget, and many of our legislators are in favor of cutting state funding for our public schools, despite the data, the research, and local support that calls for prioritizing our schools. Grab a cup of coffee or hop on the treadmill because we talk budget, statistics, and legislation, but it's worth it, I promise. Nicole, thank you so much for being here. Our school community appreciates all that you are doing to spread awareness and advocate for our district and for all of Ohio's public schools. I personally was not aware of these current events until you came to our elementary school PTA meeting. And I know that there are so many other parents and community members who would want to be aware, but we're just simply not tuned in for so many different reasons. So, my hope for today is to get this conversation out to the entire community. You and so many others are working to ensure that our state funding for all of Ohio public schools is stable, responsive to economic realities, and equitable for all students. Our state representatives are currently drafting and finalizing their budget proposals to be negotiated before the budget is finalized in July. And while July may seem far away, the urgency is now. Our community needs to make our voices heard, and one way we can do that is by contacting our representatives. And we're going to talk about that messaging today. So I will share much more information in the show notes so that the audience can fully digest the key priorities. In this conversation with you, I want to talk about how we got here and why we're having to remind our state legislators about the importance of education and strong public schools. So, can you give us a brief background of those events and decisions that have led us here?
Oh, well, Bethany, thanks for having me. And I appreciate, as we've been engaging with our community members, just them taking an interest in what this means for our local community and just how important it is for our local community. And so I really appreciate you having me on here. So, school funding in Ohio is very, very complicated. It was ruled unconstitutional by the state Supreme Court in the late 1990s, early 2000s, 4 times over. The courts eventually said, we're going to stop hearing this because it's the same thing over and over again. You need to fix your formula. Since then, we've seen several variations. So the state does its budget every 2 years. So every 2 years, they talk about funding for schools and education and what that's going to look like for the next 2 years. So that's what we have to plan on every 2 years. And over that time period, we've seen several variations of different formulas, some based on inputs, student demographics, and all of those things, some based on student outcomes, some being a mix of those things. We've had various new ideas for how best to educate children through the state's budget process. Sometimes funding tied to the new ideas, sometimes not. Normally just pennies on the dollar when it is. When Governor DeWine started, in his first term, he introduced what's known as the Student Wellness and Success Funds, which are wraparound dollars to help support the student in the classrooms for things like mental health and wellness and nursing and those sorts of things. And so lots of different variations, and we had no formulas for a lot of years. In, I think it was 2000 and I want to say 17, 18, the Speaker of the House at the time, Bob Cupp, who was a Republican, and a state senator, John Patterson, got together in a bipartisan effort to finally solve the issue of whether our school funding system in Ohio is constitutional. They created a work group made up of superintendents, treasurers, and other experts around the state in this space. They worked over a 3.5 year period to develop a formula that is based on what does it cost to educate a student. And we talk about it being a shared responsibility between the state and the local community. This formula takes that into account. The idea was to phase it in over a 6 year period. We're currently in year 4 of that period. And what the state's working on is the final years 5 and 6. That's what this next biennium would be. What's at stake right now is that funding formula. It's called the Fair School Funding Formula. A lot of people have worked really hard to get that in place because it's something that we can look to and help us have an idea of what the future might hold when we're trying to determine what programs and services we're going to have available for our students. We've heard from some people at the state there at the state house that are in leadership positions about wanting to do away with the Fair School Funding Formula and wanting to reduce funding for public schools overall. We've also heard from a lot of lawmakers on both sides that really think that it's important that we are engaging our community to make sure that they understand how school funding in Ohio works and how the state's budget process works around that.
Very helpful. Thank you. I know it's been obviously many, many years in the making, and there is so much that we could dissect further there. But I think right now, obviously, we focus on the here and now and how we can make a difference and what we should be thinking about for the future. Some numbers that I have are that the average cost in 2025 to educate one student in the Westerville School District is $12,426, and the state covers approximately $3,000 of that cost. Is that reflected in our current budget? And what does that look like for next year and the years after?
That's a great question. Our state share is at 23% currently. Next year, that would drop, based on the governor's proposal, that would drop to 18%, and then in the final year, 11%. So that $3,000 would be reduced accordingly. Under the proposal that the House has submitted, that's been introduced, I just testified yesterday on that proposal, that the formula would be gone, and they would give us a couple of dollars more per student. And then they are also looking at severely reducing our local property tax levies, our voted levies, that would ultimately reduce our revenues by over $100 million next year.
Wow. Not to mention the fact that we just had a failed levy.
Yes.
And so this is obviously focused on Westerville. The budget as a whole will impact all of Ohio. What about those competing factors? Why are we even considering and hopefully not enacting this reduced funding for public schools? What are the other priorities that are competing for those funds?
So I think if you ask a state legislator, they will tell you there's only so much money available. We went through a period of time where we had some federal dollars due to the pandemic. The local schools did, the state also did. And those dollars have since dried up. And so there's only so much. During the same time, the state worked really hard to expand what they call school choice options, which are vouchers to private schools universally. So everyone who attends a private school is eligible for a private voucher. And there's also been increased per pupil amounts for charter schools as well. And so I think it's important for people to understand, when I mentioned earlier about the Fair School Funding Plan, that was meant to be phased in over a 6-year period. And so like today, the state has phased in about 67% of that formula. Right? They did not subject the per pupil amounts for the private vouchers and the charter schools to any phase in. They just increase the amounts. And so what we're seeing is the state is taking into account for traditional public schools in Ohio. Uh, they're looking at our local property wealth, our resident income. What is our local capacity? What is our local community's share of that responsibility to educate a student? And they're continuing to update that year over year with inflationary changes that we've seen with property wealth and resident income. But yet they're not updating the side of the formula that says what does it cost to educate a student. And so that's ultimately resulted in schools like Westerville, receiving less money in the second year of the biennium, and under the governor's proposal would continue to see less money because they're keeping those what does it cost the same. We lost $4 million this year just compared to last year because of that change. And that is inherently meaning that we're seeing reduced funding, but the private and vouchers budgets under the governor's proposal. So traditional public schools in Ohio would have seen a over $100 million decrease in their funding. Private and charter schools would have seen an over $500 million increase in their funding from the state. The pie is only so big, so it has to come from somewhere. And the state has also recently reduced its top tier income tax levels, and so that's also reduced their opportunity for revenue for school systems.
Mm-hmm. So to round that out, the other number I have here is that the state funds up to $6,000 per K through 8 private voucher and $8,400 per 9 to 12 private voucher, compared to that 3,000 number we had for public.
Yes. And I do also want to mention we are still required to provide transportation for the students receiving those vouchers, or if we're not able to, due to it just not being feasible, then we have to make a payment in lieu of transportation to those families. And just through lots of conversation and research around this, our associations at the state level aren't aware of any other state that requires its public schools to transport private school students. But we're continuing to see funds drawn away, but yet we're still required to provide services for those things. So I like to tell people that when we think about the state's responsibility that is established under the state's constitution to create a thorough and efficient set of common schools, we want to think about what is good public policy for the state as a whole, right? And I think about public services and what does that mean? And I don't know of any public service in the state or anywhere that where a citizen can choose not to use that public service that's provided to them and receive a tax credit or what they would call free alternative, which is actually funded at another taxpayer's expense, right? To whatever they choose to do. And then the public service still has to provide transportation and other services. We only do that with education in the state of Ohio.
And that, I imagine, is a significant cost.
It is.
That obviously eats into what we have available for our students.
Yeah, I actually just shared with a couple of our local legislators this morning, and I believe I shared in the House Finance Committee yesterday that the change, they made a change I think it was in the last budget, this current biennium budget, that required us to transport students who received the autism and John Peterson scholarship vouchers. And that was an additional $1.8 million to our operating budget, just that one change. And the funding around that for us did not change.
Wow. To help clarify that picture as well, I understand that 90% of Ohio students attend our public schools.
Yeah, so under the governor's proposal, 90% attend the public schools. 72% of the state's budget for education was allocated under the governor's proposal to the public schools.
Where can we learn more about this divide and the argument between school choice and private school vouchers and how this has come to be?
That's a great question. So, Honesty for Ohio Education has a great website that has a lot of information on it. All In for Ohio Kids is a group that has worked really hard to advocate for the fair school funding plan. Um, I would always encourage folks to reach out to their local state legislators. We have resources to help them, find if they're not sure who that is. We have resources to help connect them, which we'd be happy to do. And I think the other piece is the all of these hearings and all of those things. It's all very complicated, and things change very rapidly in this space. Like I mentioned, we had the governor's proposal that we lived with for a hot minute, and then now we have the House's proposal that we're still. I mean, it's over 4,000 pages, right? We're trying to work through and make sure that we understand all of the implications should that pass. That was introduced on the first. They've had hearings all week, except for today. Since then, they are expected to vote it out of committee, out of the House Finance Committee on Tuesday, and then put it into the front of the full House on the 9th for a full vote of the House. Very quick turnaround for a 4,000-page document that schools and community members, and this isn't just the school's budget, this is the state's budget, right? So when I'm going down to the State House to testify and explain to the legislators on the House Finance Committee about how this will affect Westerville City Schools, this community, and our system. I'm also down there with, the Children's Hunger Alliance, the Buckeye Institute was down there, which they are also very interested in the school space. The Department of Behavioral Health, they were down there talking about their budget. There's everything that the state does, right, is also included in this. And so we have to remember with our legislators, they all have the different committees that they serve on, but they're not necessarily experts in the school funding space. And so, I view my job in this role is to help educate them and just how that will impact our local community. And it's really important that they're hearing from not just me, not just our superintendent, not just our school board members, but our parents and families and our non-parents, community members that choose to live in Westerville because we have a great community, because we have great schools, like all of those things, even if you don't have kids in the school system, because the people that want to make sure that their doctors and mechanics are also educated in society, right? I think that it's important that they're hearing from everyone. There was a mom that testified yesterday ahead of me. Her story was very impactful. She talked about her daughter who's in first grade, and her teacher decided she was going to get out of teaching the week before spring break, and is no longer a teacher in the public education space. And who knows if she's even a teacher at this point anymore. But she talked about how, felling levies and them having to increase class sizes, and it just got to the point to where it was too much for the teacher to continue in this work. And, that breaks my heart. I think that people, I think most communities really value their public school system. I think that we are, in a lot of ways, the heart of the local community. I think it's just important for our legislators to see that and understand that, because I believe that there is a real push to privatize education in Ohio. And there have been state lawmakers that have said that out loud. I feel like they used to try to hide it a little bit, but they're not doing that anymore. Mm-hmm. And it's just important that everybody understands that this is the route that our state is trying to take. And we want to do all we can to help educate the community to make sure that they understand that.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a really great reminder that we can't lose sight of all of the successes of the public school system, right? And that we do have a strong school system right now, and we don't want to lose insight into how that really makes a difference for the community, and we have to act now to keep it that way and to keep it so strong. What can you tell us about the house budget and how that might impact our community here?
Well, I think one of the biggest pieces of the house's budget is that it essentially eliminates the Fair School Funding Plan, a plan that a lot of people put a lot of work into over the last several years. And we have an opportunity to get to a place to where Ohio's school funding system finally meets the state's constitutional requirements. And there are a lot of experts around the state that have provided all of the data that is needed to help understand this. And the people that have been doing this since the Duralf decision, I mean, they can tell you they're worried about us repeating history with some. I feel like we're going in cycles with this. During the Duralf decision, if we just look at statewide, the state was providing about 42% in its shared responsibility of that cost of education. I think it's widely accepted that that should be closer to 50%, a state and local split at state level. Of course, you're going to have variances depending on different demographics and things, but statewide, that should be closer to 50%. It was at 42% during the Duralf days. It currently sits at around 38%. So we're below where we were even during the Duralf days. And, under the governor's proposal, we would be down to nearly 32%. And so I haven't seen the numbers for under the state, the budget, the House's sub bill and their proposal. Again, I've had it like 3 days. Mm-hmm. So we're still trying to work through some of that stuff. But I think it's important to understand that the school funding system in Ohio is not constitutional. It's been ruled that way 4 times over due to the over-reliance on local property taxes and residual budgeting by the state. And residual budgeting basically means we're getting what's left over in the state's budget, rather than what does it actually cost to educate a student in Ohio. The state has done several cost studies that they have completed and have been released. And they haven't taken any of those cost studies in account for a lot of our specialized categories. So gifted, special education, career tech, disadvantaged pupils, so economically disadvantaged, all of that. They've yet to incorporate any of those into a funding formula because, and I don't want to speak for the entire legislature, but what I've heard from some lawmakers is that the costs are so high, the need is so high that it wouldn't be sustainable for the state to implement those cost studies. And we try to educate them on, well, you understand that this is the reality of the world that we live in. This is what we are paying for every day. These are the resources that our students need. And that just means if the state's not doing its part, our local community is picking up more. Mm-hmm. And over the last couple of decades, there's been lots of, various legislative actions that have diverted additional revenue opportunities to school systems away from schools in the name of economic development. And so what that means is that our homeowners are paying more and our businesses are paying less. And Dr. Howard Fleeter is a economist that used to work for the Department of Taxation. He now works for the Ohio Education Policy Institute. and he has data for days on the Ohio Education Policy Institute's website. But he has a nice table where he's put together since 1975 to 2023 the cost shift for education from businesses to homeowners and farmers has shifted by 20%, over 20%.
Wow.
And when we think about the rise in home values and the housing shortages and all that, a lot of the increase at the local level for property taxes is because of all the changes in state law around not fully funding the formula or fully funding their part, but also they're providing basically tax abatements, which means everybody else is paying more because other people are not paying taxes. So it's just all the things put together over the last couple of decades. It feels almost purposeful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And obviously incredibly complicated,
Yes.
beyond what we can talk about in a brief conversation. But to round it out, if you can share with us what keeps you personally motivated to fight this fight, other than obviously your job and your role, but you have to fight through, I imagine, so much negativity at the very least, right? How do you stay focused on our needs and stay positive and continue to fight this fight?
It's a great question. Sometimes I wonder. No, so I grew up in poverty in Southern Ohio, and public schools changed my life.
Mm-hmm.
I believe wholeheartedly that every kid in the state of Ohio and throughout the world has the right to a quality education, regardless of where they live. And I believe that it's the state's responsibility to ensure that that happens, and our state lawmakers set policy around that. For me, it's personal. I want to see every kid succeed. I think when we talk about society's issues, and you'll hear in some of these budget conversations how much we're spending on Medicaid, how much we're spending on the state prison system, behavioral health, like all these things. I feel like if we have an educated society, that would solve a lot of our own problems. And I hope that people realize that.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, even if you don't have kids in our school system, I know you still want your doctor to be educated or your mechanic to be educated, right? I mean, that's how society works. So the funding mechanisms that we have in place are from what the state has established. And so it's just a matter of us helping inform the state what makes sense,
Mm-hmm.
that we're making sure that they understand what they're doing and how to our community and how it impacts our community.
Mm-hmm. Well, I will certainly try to do my part in reaching out to those who can make an impact, and to share this conversation and to empathize with our community, and for me especially, that's other parents of young children who, as I said in the beginning, just don't even know that this is happening, and we're not part of this conversation yet. And so I think it's really important that we focus on most urgently what we need to do right now, and then keep our sights set on our future for the state of Ohio. If you can share with us before we end, what is most impactful? Are there certain representatives that we should reach out to? And and I will share the messaging that the district put together in the show notes again. But who should we reach out to?
That's a great question. Thanks for asking. So obviously our local legislators, it's important that they hear from us. So our school district overall, we have 4 state senators and 4 state House of Representative members. So we cover a pretty good area. So I think it's important to reach out to them. Also, the chairs of the education committees for both the House and the Senate. Our state senator in the Delaware County area, Andy Brenner, actually chairs the state Senate education committee. The people who serve on the finance committee in both the House and the Senate, Speaker Matt Huffman. Matt Huffman is the House Speaker right now. He was quoted as saying that he wants to decrease funding for public schools. I think it's really important that we're reaching out to him, and also the Senate President Rob McCauley. He is. They are the ones that decide what comes in front of the House and the Senate for a vote, and so it's really important that they understand and hear from our community how the state's decisions are impacting us.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much, Nicole. This has been so insightful, and I, for one,
Yes.
will certainly be paying attention and staying in tune to updates on the budget, and really hoping that we can make a difference and make our voices heard.
Great. Thank you.